Before science provided us with the comfort of equations and the certainty of the Big Bang, there existed a darkness much deeper, a primordial question whispered on moonless nights over the Aegean Sea. What was there before everything? For the ancient Greeks, the answer was not found in the observation of the cosmos, but in its invention. This is not the tale of a universe born from physics, but one forged in the crucible of passion, fear, and divine violence. This is the story of the first dawn, a dawn of blood and rebellion. Our journey begins in chaos, not an entity, but a primordial state, an open rift, an unfathomable yawn in the void. From this absolute silence, devoid of will or purpose, the first fundamental forces were torn apart, the foundations of reality. First, Gaia, the earth of broad breasts, the safe and eternal base for all that would exist. In the most remote depths, Tartarus emerged, an abyss as deep beneath the earth as the sky is above it. And with them, Eros was born, desire, the unstoppable engine of the universe, the principle of attraction that would ensure that nothingness would not reign again. From the darkness of chaos also sprang Erebus, the underground darkness, and Nyx, the impenetrable night. But was this a serene birth, or the violent tearing apart of concepts that were once one? Gaia? The earth now existed in monumental solitude, driven by an intrinsic need, by the echo of Eros. She gave birth by herself to her equal. She created Uranus, the starry sky, to cover her completely, to be an eternal home for the blessed gods. Without a father, she also bore the Uria, the high mountains, and Pontus, the barren sea of turbulent waves. The cosmic stage was set. Uranus gazed down at Gaia from the heights and in a first and colossal embrace, covered her. From this monumental union would be born the first generation of beings with form and consciousness, but they would not be the gods we know. They would be something older, rawer, more terrifying. The first fruits of this union were not gods of serene beauty, but nightmares of pure power. The Hecatonchires, giants with 100 arms and 50 heads, a manifestation of brute and indomitable strength. Then came the Cyclops, formidable craftsmen with a single eye in their foreheads, capable of forging the very power of nature. Uranus, the sky, looked upon his progeny and felt not pride, but a primordial dread and deep revulsion. They were an affront to his majesty, a reminder of the chaotic power from which everything originated. He made a decision that would mark the first act of cosmic tyranny, instead of allowing them to see the light. He hated them from the beginning and, as they were born, he pushed them back into the depths of their mother, into the prison of his own flesh. Gaia groaned under the weight of her unborn children. Her agony was immense. Caught between love for her offspring and the cruelty of her husband, the order of the cosmos had been established, but it was an order based on suffering and oppression. It was in this darkness, in this unbearable pressure, where Gaia's resentment transformed into a plan. From her own being, she extracted a new metal, adamantine, grey and shining, and with it forged the first weapon in history, a huge serrated sickle. She then summoned her next children, those whom Uranus had not yet imprisoned. There were 12, 6 men and 6 women, appearing more divine and possessing sharper minds, the Titans. Gaia spoke to them of their father's outrage and asked for their help in her revenge. Fear silenced them all, except for one. Cronus, the youngest with a twisted and ambitious mind, stepped forward. He hated his father and saw in his mother's despair an opportunity. Cronus's resolution sealed the fate of the first king of the universe. Gaia handed him the sickle and explained her plan, hiding him to wait for the arrival of night. The stage was set for the first betrayal, the first coup in the history of the cosmos, an act of violence intended to liberate some and overthrow another. This moment leaves a question suspended in the dawn of time. Was the universe destined to be born from rebellion? To be forged in a cycle of violence where the son inevitably rises against the father? The enigma of the succession of power, born in the darkness beneath a starry sky, would resonate through all the coming ages. The trap was ready, and the young Titan, armed with his mother's fury and his own ambition, awaited in the shadows. The cosmos held its breath, for the tyranny of the sky was about to end, giving way to a new and formidable sovereignty. The Age of the Titans. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. And so, from the depths of chaos and the tyranny of his father, the Titans emerged not as saviors but as the new masters of the universe. The cosmos, once a stage of sterile oppression under the yoke of Uranus, which imprisoned his children in the womb of Gaia, breathed a brief and deceptive sigh of relief. This new order, however, would be born from an act of violence as primordial as creation itself. The cosmic atmosphere was tense. A peace forged through betrayal, a calm that concealed the scars of the first divine war. The Titans, led by the youngest and most ambitious among them, Kronos, had established their rule, but the echo of the blood spilled from their father would resonate through the ages, marking their reign with the stigma of prophecy and fear. The actors in this cosmic drama were figures of unimaginable power. At the center, Kronos, whose name would forever evoke the devouring time. His decision to wield the adamantine sickle forged by his mother Gaia was not merely an act of filial piety, but a calculated power grab. By mutilating his father Uranus, he not only freed his siblings but positioned himself as the undisputed monarch. Beside him, his sister Rhea, who would become his queen, a tragic figure whose maternal love would clash with her husband's consuming paranoia. However, Kronos' key resolution was not to take the throne, but to betray his own revolution. Fearful of the Cyclops and the Hecatonchires, the formidable brothers who aided him in his rise, he imprisoned them once more in the depths of Tartarus, repeating the sin of his father. Was this the first indication that power, once obtained, only seeks to perpetuate itself, even through the tyranny it swore to destroy? With Kronos on the throne of Mount Otris began what later poets would idealize as the Golden Age. An era, according to their verses, free from labor, war, and old age. But beneath the golden surface of this apparent utopia, the poison of a prophecy stirred. Just as he had dethroned his father, it was foretold that one of his own children would dethrone him. Fear, that ancient and powerful force, seized the heart of the king of the Titans. His solution was as monstrous as it was direct: to devour his own offspring. As Rhea gave birth to the future gods, Kronos swallowed them whole. One by one, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all were consumed by their father's paranoia, imprisoned not in the earth but in the very bowels of time itself. The universe fell into an unnatural stillness, an order maintained by an act of cosmic cannibalism. But a mother's desperation is a force capable of defying fate itself. Distressed, Rhea sought the counsel of her parents, Gaia and Uranus, who revealed a plan to save her next child. When the sixth was born, Rhea wrapped a stone, the omphalos, in swaddling clothes and presented it to Kronos. Blinded by his fear, the Titan swallowed it without hesitation, unknowingly sealing his own doom. The immediate consequences of this deception were silent but monumental. Kronos, believing himself safe, continued his reign over an apparently peaceful cosmos. The other Titans, such as Oceanus, Hyperion, and Iapetus, ruled their respective domains, but all under the shadow of a monarch who had devoured the future to secure his present. The universe was in a state of stagnation, a peace bought at the cost of the life and freedom of its rightful heirs. But on the distant island of Crete, hidden in a cave on Mount Ida, the saved child grew strong and vigorous, nursed by the goat Amalthea and protected by the Curetes warriors, who struck their shields to drown out his cries so that they would not reach his father's ears. The cosmos held a secret, a latent hope maturing in the shadows. And here lies the true enigma of the Age of the Titans. It is not their power, but their inevitable fragility. How could a generation born from rebellion against tyranny succumb to the same disease of power? Repeating a cycle of patricide and oppression, the legacy of Kronos is not that of a golden age, but that of a timeless warning about how the fear of losing control can lead a leader to become the monster he once fought. Was his reign an era of peace or merely a gilded cage where harmony was maintained by the absence of any challenge? The mystery persists, etched in the stars and in the memory of the earth. The recollection of a time when the universe was ruled by giants whose greatest enemy was not an external force, but the shadow of their own future. Far from the watchful gaze of his father, in the caves of Crete, a godchild grew in secret, nourished not only by milk and honey but by a purpose forged in injustice. His name was Zeus, and his destiny was to lead a rebellion that would shake the very foundations of the cosmos. The fall of the Titans, announced in the shadows of their own golden age, was not a sudden event, but the culmination of a feared prophecy and a rebellion conceived in the utmost secrecy. The echo of Uranus's curse resonated in the halls of Kronos, a constant whisper that poisoned his reign. The prophecy was clear. Just as he had overthrown his father, one of his own children would overthrow him. This knowledge did not inspire caution, but rather a paranoid tyranny that would define the twilight of his era. The cosmos, under the scepter of Kronos, lived in a fragile peace, a superficial calm that concealed a primordial terror. The king of the Titans, in a resolution that would seal his fate, implemented a policy of absolute control. To devour each of his children at the moment of their birth. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, one after another they were swallowed and imprisoned in the living crypt of their father's own body. But could a kingdom built on parricide and fear truly endure? The key figures in this cosmic drama would make decisions that would alter the balance of the universe. The first to act was the Titaness Rhea, wife of Kronos and mother of the devoured gods. Her pain, accumulated with each lost child, transformed into a silent determination. Upon the birth of her sixth offspring, Zeus, Rhea made a crucial decision that constituted the first act of insurrection. Instead of handing over the child, she wrapped a rock, the Omphalos stone, in swaddling clothes and presented it to a Kronos blinded by his own tyranny. The deception worked. As Kronos swallowed the stone, believing he had secured his throne once more, Rhea hid Zeus on the island of Crete. There the young god was raised in secret, nursed by the goat Amalthea and protected by the Curetes, divine warriors whose shields and spears resonated to drown out the baby's cries, keeping him safe from his father's ears. Zeus grew not as a prince in a court, but as a revolutionary leader in exile, accumulating power and nurturing a righteous hatred. Upon reaching maturity, his determination was unequivocal. He would confront his father, free his siblings, and reclaim the cosmos. To achieve this, he sought the counsel of Medea, the titaness of wisdom and cunning, who provided him with the ultimate weapon. Not a sword, but an emetic potion designed to reverse Kronos' original crime. The unfolding of events accelerated with strategic precision. Zeus, disguised, infiltrated his father's court and, following Medea's plan, served Kronos a cup of nectar mixed with the potion. The effect was immediate and cataclysmic. Kronos, writhing in pain, first vomited the Omphalos stone, and then, in reverse order to how he had devoured them, his children, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter and Hestia, emerged not as helpless infants but as adult gods, whole and brimming with a fury contained for eons. The rebellion had begun. What followed was not a mere skirmish, but a total war that shook the foundations of existence. The Titanomachy. For 10 years the universe was a battlefield. The Titans, led by Kronos and Atlas, fought from Mount Otris. The new gods, under the banner of Zeus, did so from Mount Olympus. The balance tipped when Zeus made a brilliant strategic resolution to free the allies his father had kept imprisoned in Tartarus. The Cyclopes, master blacksmiths, forged for him the thunderbolt, for Poseidon the trident, and for Hades the helmet of invisibility. The Hecatoncheires, giants with 100 arms, joined the fight, hurling entire mountains against the ranks of the Titans. The war reached its climax, and the Titans were finally defeated. The immediate consequences were seismic. The old order was dismantled with a brutality that reflected the tyranny that had preceded it. Kronos and most of the male Titans were chained and thrown into the depths of Tartarus. the very prison from which Zeus had freed his allies, now guarded by the Hecatoncheires. Cosmic power changed hands definitively. The era of the Titans had concluded, giving way to a new generation of rulers, the Olympian gods. The victory was absolute, the ancient regime was destroyed, and its leaders were imprisoned for eternity. However, in the silence that followed the roar of battle, a new problem began to take shape. With the old tyrant chained in the depths, a greater enigma arose. How would a cosmos be governed without a single sovereign? How would power be divided among brothers and sisters who, although united in war, carried within them the seeds of ambition and conflict? Military victory was one thing, but establishing a stable government was a completely different challenge. The war had ended, but peace still had to be forged. The task of building a new order, of distributing the domains of the sky, the sea, and the underworld, and of establishing the laws of their new celestial court, would become the first and most defining challenge of their reign, the foundation of Mount Olympus. With the fall of Kronos and the end of the brutal Titanomachy, the echo of the cosmic war finally began to fade. But victory did not bring immediate peace. Instead, it left a wounded universe and a dangerous power vacuum. The throne of the cosmos was vacant, and the victors, the children of Kronos, found themselves facing a challenge as great as the war itself. Not how to conquer, but how to govern. The atmosphere was one of tense anticipation. The old order had been annihilated, but the new had yet to be born. It was a moment of infinite possibilities and incalculable risks, a blank canvas upon which the fate of gods and mortals would be painted for the eons to come. How would an entire universe be divided among brothers who, although allies in war, were driven by their own ambitions and disparate natures? The key players in this cosmic drama were the three brothers who had led the rebellion: Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Each had been instrumental in the victory, and each felt a legitimate claim to power. Zeus, the strategist and charismatic leader who had freed his brothers and commanded the armies. Poseidon, the impetuous lord of brute strength whose trident could shake the foundations of the world. And Hades, the eldest, the first to be devoured and the last to be freed, a shadowy figure whose contribution to the war often remained in the shadows. The resolution they reached was an act of political pragmatism that would resonate throughout eternity. Rather than risk a new civil war, they agreed to divide the universe, but how to do so fairly. The solution was a drawing of lots. A gamble of chance that, in retrospect, reveals itself laden with a mysterious fate. 3 lots were prepared, each representing a domain of the cosmos. This seemingly democratic act would become the cornerstone of the new theocracy. The unfolding of events was swift and definitive. The 3 brothers drew lots for the realms of the universe. Zeus, the youngest but the undisputed leader, received the grand prize, the vast and luminous skies. With this domain came control over the weather, lightning and thunder, but more importantly, sovereignty over all other gods and mortals. He became the king of Olympus, the supreme judge, the arbiter of divine order. His throne was established atop the highest mountain, an ethereal palace among the clouds from where his gaze could encompass all. Poseidon, with a nature as volatile as the waters, was assigned the seas. His realm was an empire of unexplored depths, home to ancient monsters and terrifying beauty. From his coral palace he ruled the waves, sea storms and earthquakes, and finally Hades was given the most enigmatic and feared domain: the underworld, the vast and silent realm of the dead. It was not a punishment, but a monumental responsibility. He became the custodian of all souls departing the world of the living, a king rich in subjects who would never rebel, but perpetually isolated from the light and life of the upper world. The earth itself, along with Mount Olympus, was declared common territory, a stage where the influences of all gods could intersect. The consequences of this division were immediate and profound. A new hierarchy was established, a pantheon of 12 main gods who would reside on Olympus, forming a celestial court around Zeus, his sister and wife. Hera became the queen, protector of marriage, her power often in direct conflict with Zeus's countless infidelities, sowing perpetual discord at the heart of power. Demeter took control of agriculture and the seasons, a vital power that connected her directly with the well-being of humanity. Hestia, the goddess of the home and the hearthfire, became the silent and stable center of this new divine family. They were joined by a second generation of gods. Apollo, the god of light and prophecy, Artemis, the lunar huntress, Athena, the wise strategist, Ares, the brutal god of war, Aphrodite, the embodiment of love and desire, Hephaestus, the master blacksmith, and Hermes, the swift messenger. Together they formed a divine government, a complex system of alliances, rivalries, and domains that would impose a new order on the cosmos. This new order, although seemingly stable, left a central enigma floating in the air. The division, while pragmatic, sowed the seeds of future conflicts. Hades' seclusion in the underworld generated silent resentment. Zeus's sovereignty, although accepted, would be constantly challenged, not by force, but by intrigue. Olympus became a microcosm of human politics, filled with jealousy, affairs, and power struggles. The true mystery is not how power was divided, but the very nature of that division, a precarious balance that guaranteed an eternal drama. And as the gods attended to their new domains and their complex relationships, a crucial factor barely entered their calculations. On Earth, that common and neutral domain, a fragile and ephemeral creation, was beginning to take its first steps. Humanity. They were powerless creatures, exposed to the elements and the whims of the divine. Their existence passed almost unnoticed by the new masters of the universe. Almost, because while the gods consolidated their power on Earth, humanity trembled in the darkness, unaware that a renegade titan, Prometheus, was about to challenge Zeus himself to deliver them a forbidden gift, sacred fire. With the new order of Olympus firmly established and the powers distributed under the aegis of Zeus, a fragile peace seemed to reign over the cosmos. However, while the gods reveled in their newly acquired power, on Earth, an emerging and fragile creation, humanity, lived in the shadows, devoid of the tools to overcome its own weakness. They inhabited cold caves, trembling in the darkness, easy prey for beasts and the whims of an unrelenting nature. Their existence was a constant struggle for survival, ignored by the pantheon that now governed their fate. Divine politics, focused on the consolidation of power, regarded mortals as a minor piece, an anonymous mass without relevance on the grand cosmic board. But not all immortals shared this indifference. In this scenario of power and abandonment, a singular figure emerges, Prometheus, a titan, son of Iapetus, but one who, thanks to his gift of foresight, had chosen the side of Zeus during the Titanomachy. He was not a defeated enemy, but an ally, a counselor who knew the old and new paths of power. However, unlike the Olympians, Prometheus felt a deep compassion for the helpless humanity, which he himself, according to some traditions, had helped to shape from clay. The turning point was his intervention at a famous banquet in Mycenae, where it was to be decided what portion of the sacrifices would belong to the gods and which to men. Prometheus devised a deception. He presented Zeus with two offerings. One, the bones covered in appetizing fat. The other, the meat and entrails hidden beneath an unpleasant stomach. Zeus's choice, guided by appearance, was that of the offering of fat and bones, sealing an unfavorable pact for the gods. The wrath of the king of Olympus was not only due to the deception, but also to the political implication. A titan had challenged his judgment and favored mortals. Was this the first echo of a new rebellion? Zeus's retaliation was immediate and calculated. As punishment for Prometheus's audacity, the sovereign of Olympus decreed that humanity would have no access to fire. He denied them warmth, light, and with it, the key to progress. It was a sentence that condemned men to a perpetual childhood of vulnerability. But Prometheus, whose name means the one who thinks ahead, had anticipated Zeus's cruelty. Observing from afar the suffering of his charges, he made a resolution that would forever change the relationship between heaven and earth. He challenged the supreme authority. In an act of stealth and unprecedented bravery, he ascended to the heights of Olympus, or according to other sources, to the celestial workshop of Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, there where Zeus's lightning bolts were forged. He stole a spark from the sacred fire, hid it in the hollow of a fennel stalk, and began his descent to earth. The delivery of that spark to humanity was not merely a gift of warmth and light, it was the gift of knowledge. Technology, art, and civilization. With fire, men learned to forge metals, to cook their food, to build shelters, and to gather in community, dispelling the shadows of ignorance. The consequences of this act of cosmic defiance were seismic. For humanity, it was the dawn of a new era. They ceased to be fearful creatures and became architects of their own destiny, an ascending force whose potential now seemed limitless. But for Prometheus, the price of his compassion was terrible. The fury of Zeus, no longer contained, unleashed itself with methodical cruelty. The Titan was captured by Hephaestus, Kratos, and Bia, personifications of Zeus's power and violence, and taken to the ends of the world, to the desolate mountains of the Caucasus. There he was chained to a rock, defenseless. Each day an eagle sent by Zeus descended to devour his immortal liver, which regenerated every night, condemning him to an eternal cycle of agony. His punishment was not private, it was a public spectacle, a brutal and perpetual warning to anyone, god or mortal, who dared to question the authority of Olympus. Here lies the true enigma of the Titan. Tradition paints him as a martyr and a savior, the supreme benefactor of humanity. But was his act a gesture of pure compassion or a calculated move in the eternal game of power against Zeus? Using humanity as his pawn. By delivering fire, Prometheus did not merely provide a tool, he unleashed a force that the gods could no longer fully control. He knew, with his gift of foresight, that human progress would bring not only wonders but also arrogance, war, and the capacity to challenge their creators. Was fire a gift or a disguised curse, a spark of divinity that would inevitably burn those who possessed it? The legacy of Prometheus is therefore an ambiguous shadow, a mystery about the true intention behind the greatest act of rebellion against the divine order. Humanity had gained its independence, but at a cost it did not yet understand. The direct punishment of Prometheus was only the first act of Zeus's revenge. For humanity, now masters of fire, the king of the gods prepared a much more subtle and terrible gift. A creation forged to bring misfortune to the mortal world, the woman named Pandora. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. The punishment of Prometheus was, however, not the end of Zeus's revenge. Humanity, now in possession of the sacred fire, had become arrogant in the eyes of Olympus, and its insolence required a lesson much deeper and more lasting. The retaliation of the king of the gods would not be directed at a single titan, but at the entire mortal lineage that had benefited from his defiance. In the celestial halls, amid storm clouds, a plan of terrifying subtlety was conceived. A poisoned gift that would forever change the human condition. The context of this divine resolution was that of a pristine world. According to ancient poets, humanity, composed solely of men, lived in a sort of golden age. Free from disease, from laborious toil, and from old age, their existence echoed the life of the gods themselves. The fire stolen by Prometheus was the first crack in this utopia, a symbol of knowledge and autonomy that Zeus could not tolerate. His decree was absolute. If fire was a gift for men, he would send them an evil that they would embrace with joy. The order was given to Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, lame but unmatched in his skill. His task was to mold a figure from earth and water, a creature with the appearance of an immortal goddess. The key figures in this celestial conspiracy were the highest powers of Olympus, each contributing to the creation of this masterpiece of fate. Hephaestus forged the body, endowing it with perfect beauty and a human voice. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, dressed her in silver robes, an embroidered veil, and garlands of fresh flowers, teaching her the arts of weaving. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, poured upon her grace and an irresistible desire, but also the anguish of longing. And finally, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the divine trickster, was responsible for the most crucial and sinister contribution. He granted her a cunning mind, a sly character, and above all, an insatiable curiosity. They named her Pandora, the one who gives all, or the one who has all the gifts, a name whose echo resonates with profound irony. Her fate was to be delivered to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus, whose name means the one who thinks afterward. Prometheus had explicitly warned him never to accept a gift from Zeus, but Epimetheus's resolution would seal the fate of all. The unfolding of events was as swift as it was inexorable. Hermes descended from Olympus, carrying with him the dazzling Pandora and a mysterious object, a large pithos, a terracotta storage jar, sealed and heavy. It was not a box, as later translations suggest, but a common container in Greek households used to store wine, oil, or grain. But this jar contained something very different. Upon seeing Pandora, Epimetheus was captivated by her divine beauty. Completely forgetting the warning of his wise brother, he welcomed her into his home, and with her the enigmatic gift from Zeus. For a time, peace seemed to reign. However, the curiosity implanted by Hermes began to corrode Pandora's soul. What secrets did that jar contain that she had been forbidden to open? What treasures or mysteries did Zeus guard so jealously? The question became an obsession, a constant whisper in her mind. One day, unable to resist any longer, she approached the pithos, broke the seal, and lifted the heavy lid. The immediate consequences were catastrophic. From the jar did not emerge treasures, but a plague of intangible evils that spread across the earth like an invisible swarm. Disease, pain, the fatigue of labor, sorrow, poverty, old age, and death, all the torments that until then were unknown to humanity, flew free and settled in the world of mortals. Terrified by what she had unleashed, Pandora hurried to close the lid, but it was already too late. The world would never be the same again. However, in her haste, one last spirit remained trapped at the bottom of the jar, just beneath the rim. It was Elpis, the personification of hope. And here lies the central enigma of this myth, a question that has puzzled philosophers and theologians for millennia. The fact that hope remained locked away. Was it the final act of cruelty by Zeus, denying humanity even comfort in its suffering? Or was it perhaps an unintentional act of mercy, an anchor to prevent mortals from sinking into absolute despair? Hope, trapped and contained, becomes an ambiguous concept. It is the promise of a better future, but also the prolongation of present agony. Is it a gift or the most subtle of curses, forcing humanity to endure the unbearable? The legacy of Pandora is not only suffering, but this fundamental duality that defines human existence. In this new world, marked by pain yet clinging to hope, humanity could no longer live in passive harmony. It would need champions, figures of extraordinary valor capable of challenging monsters and the fates imposed by the gods. Thus beginning a new era, the era of the rise of heroes. And so, with the jar of Pandora opened and its evils scattered across the earth, humanity found itself plunged into an era of suffering and darkness. The echo of Zeus's anger over the stolen fire and the curiosity of the first woman had created an apparently insurmountable chasm between Olympus and the mortal world. The Golden Age, if it ever existed, was now a distant memory, whispered in tales of a time when the gods walked alongside men. Now, disease, war, old age, and hard labor defined human existence. From their celestial throne, the Olympic pantheon observed a world that they themselves had contributed to fracture, a realm where their power felt like an abstract and punishing force, not an active presence. This was the desolate scene. A humanity abandoned to its fate and distant gods wrapped in their own immortal indifference. Or perhaps it was not indifference, but a calculated observation, waiting for the precise moment to intervene in a completely new way. In this context of separation, it was the very passions of the gods and not a deliberate council that would sow the seed of a new era. The fundamental resolution did not come from a divine edict to save humanity, but from the uncontrollable nature of the Olympians themselves, especially their king, Zeus. His constant escapades from Olympus, his affairs with queens, nymphs, and mortal maidens were not mere whims. They became an undeclared policy, a way to weave the divine lineage back into the tapestry of the mortal world. From these unions, often clandestine and laden with consequences, a new lineage of beings would be born. They were not gods, for mortal blood ran through their veins, condemning them to an inevitable end. But they were not mere men either. They possessed a strength, a cunning, or a beauty that betrayed their divine heritage. They were the heroes, flesh and blood bridges between two worlds that had turned their backs on each other. Figures like Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, or Bellerophon, grandson of Sisyphus, emerged as the first examples of this extraordinary phenomenon. The unfolding of events was gradual, yet unstoppable. The land, still young and wild, was plagued by monsters, relics of an older and more chaotic cosmos that the Olympians had not completely eradicated. Hydras, chimeras, gorgons and minotaurs terrorized kingdoms and devoured the unfortunate. Mortal kings and their armies were powerless against such threats. It was here that the heroes found their purpose, their stage. Each heroic feat was, in essence, an act of imposing the Olympic order upon primordial chaos. When a hero defeated a beast, he not only saved a city, he symbolically reaffirmed Zeus's victory over the Titans on a human scale. Their lives became a succession of impossible trials, journeys to the farthest reaches of the known world, and confrontations with death itself. These stories, passed down orally from generation to generation by bards and rhapsodists, became the connective tissue of Greek culture, a manual of behavior, courage, and above all, of the complex and often dangerous relationship with the divine. The immediate consequences of this heroic rise were profound. Humanity, feeling forgotten, now had champions. The gods were no longer distant abstractions. They were the parents, patrons, and sometimes direct antagonists in the great sagas that everyone knew. The favor of Athena, the wrath of Hera, or the help of Hermes manifested tangibly in the adventures of Theseus, Jason, or Cadmus. This revitalized religion and popular piety. Mortals saw in the heroes a magnified reflection of their own struggles, but with the real possibility of transcending them. However, this new closeness also brought with it a new level of danger. The world became a playing field for divine rivalries, and the heroes, along with the kingdoms they protected, were often the expendable pieces. The protection of one god could attract the fury of another, and the divine blood of a hero was both a blessing and a curse that marked his fate with tragedy. And here lies the central enigma of this era. Were the heroes a true gift to humanity, a hand extended from Olympus to guide and protect it in its new and difficult existence? Or were they, in reality, the ultimate instrument of divine vanity? Each monster defeated by a son of Zeus was an affirmation of Zeus's power. Each city founded by a demigod became a bastion of the influence of its divine progenitor. Their lives, filled with suffering and glory, served as a spectacle for the entertainment of the immortals and a perpetual warning about the limits of mortal power. The ambiguity of their purpose is the shadow that looms over all their feats. They were saviors, yes, but they were also pawns in a cosmic game whose rules they barely understood. Among this lineage of demigods, none would embody the glory, tragedy, and superhuman power of this era like Zeus's favored son, a man whose name would resonate through the millennia, condemned to a life of penance and impossible feats. Heracles and his 12 labors. And from this new lineage of demigods destined to bridge the gap between Olympus and Earth, emerged a figure whose echo would resonate for millennia, a man whose name would become synonymous with superhuman strength, but whose story is, in reality, a profound enigma of suffering, penance, and redemption. His name was Heracles. The context of his personal tragedy was forged in the heights of Olympus long before his birth. Son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, Heracles was from his conception the object of Hera's relentless hatred, the queen of the gods. His cradle was rocked by danger, his childhood marked by divine assaults. But the true crisis would not come from an external enemy, but from the depths of his own mind. In an act of supreme cruelty, the goddess Hera inflicted upon him an attack of madness, a veil of blind fury under which Heracles, the protector, murdered his own wife and children. When the fog of madness lifted, the hero found himself kneeling among the ruins of his life, his soul stained by an unforgivable crime. Seeking purification, he went to the oracle of Delphi, whose priestess, the Pythia, dictated the sentence. He must serve his cousin, King Eurystheus of Sirens, and complete 10 tasks that he would impose upon him. The key characters in this cosmic drama were a broken hero seeking atonement, a mediocre and fearful king, and a vengeful goddess pulling the strings from the shadows. Heracles' resolution to submit to Eurystheus was not an act of weakness, but of immense moral strength, the acceptance of his guilt and the willingness to pay any price for absolution. Eurystheus, for his part, secretly advised by Hera, devised a series of tasks that seemed impossible, each one designed not to test the hero, but to destroy him. Thus began the trials, a journey that would take Heracles to the farthest reaches of the known world and beyond. The unfolding of events became a legend in itself. The initial tasks focused on beasts that terrorized the Peloponnese. First, the lion of Nemea, a creature whose skin was impenetrable to any weapon. Heracles, after discovering the futility of his arrows and sword, relied on his brute strength, strangling the beast and wearing its skin as an invulnerable armor. Then the Hydra of Lerna, a multi-headed water serpent that regenerated when cut. Here, strength was not enough, ingenuity was required. With the help of his nephew Iolaus, he cauterized each severed neck, preventing their rebirth, and finally buried the immortal head under a rock. Hera, seeing that Heracles overcame the first 2 trials with help, decreed that they would not count, raising the number of tasks to 12. The tasks became more complex, demanding not only strength but patience, cunning, and diplomacy. Capturing the Cyrenian hind, sacred to Artemis, took him a year of pursuit without harming it. Cleaning the stables of Algeias, a humiliating challenge, he resolved by diverting the course of 2 rivers. A feat of divine engineering. His journey took him further and further away. He faced the Stymphalian birds with bronze beaks and claws, captured the wild bull of Crete, a harbinger of future myths on that island, and tamed the man-eating horses of Diomedes in Thrace. He travelled to the edges of the Western world to steal the cattle of Geryon, a monster with 3 bodies, and ventured into the land of the Amazons to obtain the belt of their queen, Hippolyta. Each task was another step in a brutal ascent, a geographical and spiritual map of suffering. The last 2 tasks transcended the mortal world. To obtain the golden apples of the garden of the Hesperides, he had to trick the Titan Atlas into picking them for him, holding up the heavens on his own shoulders in a moment of cosmic power. Finally, the ultimate test, descending to the underworld and bringing back Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guarded the gates of Hades. Heracles crossed the icy threshold that separates life from death, faced the god of the underworld himself, and, with his permission, subdued the beast without using weapons. He returned to the world of the living, dragging the guardian of Hades before a terrified Eurystheus who could only hide and declare him free. The immediate consequences were liberation and immortal fame. Heracles had atoned for his crime. His name was a legend in every corner of Greece. He had demonstrated that a mortal, through suffering and perseverance, could challenge fate and achieve glory comparable to that of the gods. But his story leaves a persistent enigma. What do these 12 tasks truly represent? Some scholars suggest they are an allegory of the journey of the soul, a progression through trials that purify the spirit. Others see in them an ancient stellar map where each labor corresponds to a constellation of the zodiac. The central mystery is not whether Heracles killed the lion or captured Cerberus, but what the true purpose of his ordeal was, a legacy of pain that prepared him for his final apotheosis in Olympus. The shadow of Heracles was already cast over the entire known world, a testament to the power that a mortal could achieve. But his passage through Crete in subduing the wild bull was only a foreboding. He had left behind a resolved problem, but the true horror of the island, an abomination born from the pride of a king and the fury of a god, awaited in the heart of an inextricable labyrinth, waiting for a new Athenian hero. As the echo of Heracles' feats resonated throughout Hellas, defining the archetype of the hero through brute strength and divine favor, another heroic shadow of a very different nature began to cast itself from Athens. This was not a demigod battling monsters for penance, but a mortal confronting a system of political oppression embodied in a beast. This is the enigma of Theseus and the labyrinth, a story that intertwines power, sacrifice, and the dark secret of a civilization at the height of its glory. The context places us in an Aegean dominated by the naval might of Crete. Under the rule of the legendary King Minos, Minoan civilization had established a thalassocracy, a maritime empire that demanded tribute from the continental city-states, among them an Athens still far from its future splendor. According to the account that has survived through the centuries after the death of his son Androgeos in Athens, a furious Minos imposed the cruelest of taxes, a blood tribute. Every 9 years, the city of Athens was required to send 7 young men and 7 maidens to Crete, destined to be devoured by the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, locked away in the heart of an inextricable labyrinth. This humiliation was not merely an act of vengeance, it was a demonstration of power, a perpetual reminder of Athenian subjugation. In this scenario of despair emerged the characters whose resolutions would change the balance of power. King Aegeus of Athens, elderly and grief-stricken, is forced to comply with the terrible demand. His son, Theseus, a young prince eager to prove his worth and free his people, makes a radical decision. He will volunteer as one of the 14 tributes, intending not to die but to kill the beast and break the Cretan yoke. In Crete, King Minos, custodian of a shameful family secret, the Minotaur was the son of his wife Pasiphae and a sacred bull, uses the labyrinth, the work of the genius Daedalus, as a political prison and an instrument of terror. But the key piece of the drama would be his own daughter Ariadne. Upon seeing Theseus, she falls in love and resolves to betray her father and her homeland, driven by a passion that will alter the course of history. The unfolding of events accelerates with the arrival of the ship with black sails in Crete. Theseus, presented before Minos, does not hide his challenge. It is then that Ariadne secretly hands him 2 crucial items: a sword to face the beast and a ball of thread to find his way back. With the promise of taking her with him to Athens, Theseus enters the darkness. The labyrinth was not merely a physical structure. It was a psychological challenge, a place designed to break the mind before the body, with corridors twisting upon themselves and a silence only broken by the echo of one's own footsteps and, in the distance, the inhuman roar of its prisoner. Following the thread, Theseus advanced toward the heart of the gloom, where he found the Minotaur. The ensuing struggle was not only one of strength, but of cunning against brutality. The Athenian hero, more agile and armed, managed to slay the creature, a being that was both monster and victim, prisoner of a fate he did not choose. Following the life trail of Ariadne's thread, Theseus guided the other young Athenians out of the deadly trap. The immediate consequences were seismic. Theseus, along with Ariadne and the freed tributes, fled Crete under the cover of night, delivering a devastating blow to Minos's prestige. The Minoan power, which seemed unbreakable, showed its first deep crack. But Theseus's victory was marred by tragedy. During the return journey, he abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos. Did he leave her while she slept at the behest of a god, as some myths say, or was it a cold political calculation to avoid returning to Athens with the daughter of the enemy? And in his haste, or perhaps consumed by the pride of triumph, Theseus made a fatal mistake. He forgot to change the black sails of his ship for the white ones, the agreed signal with his father to announce his success. King Aegeus, watching from the cliffs, saw the black sails on the horizon and, believing his son dead, threw himself into the sea, which has since borne his name, the Aegean Sea. Theseus returned as a liberating hero, but also as an involuntary parricide, ascending to the throne of Athens on a foundation of glory and pain. Here lies the central enigma of the chapter. Beyond the myth, what historical truth lies hidden in the legend of Theseus and the Minotaur? Archaeologists have pointed to the palace of Knossos in Crete, with its complex and labyrinthine structure, as a possible inspiration. The prominence of the bull in Minoan art and religion suggests a cult or ritual that rival cultures, such as Mycenaean Greece, may have demonized in their accounts. Was the Minotaur the symbolic representation of a king-priest of a bull cult, or is the tribute of the young people a distorted echo of a real vassal relationship between primitive Athens and powerful Crete? The labyrinth ultimately could be a metaphor for the bureaucratic and naval power of Crete, easy to enter its sphere of influence, but almost impossible to escape. The story of Theseus would then be the foundational narrative of Athens' liberation and the beginning of Minoan decline, a crucial geopolitical shift in the ancient Mediterranean. But the era of heroes was just beginning to unfold its legends. As Athens consolidated its new power elsewhere in Hellas, a different challenge was about to unite the greatest champions of the time. It would not be the solitary mission of a prince, but an epic expedition aboard a legendary ship in search of a treasure as ancient as time itself, the Golden Fleece. While the echo of Theseus's feat in Crete solidified individual heroism, in the north of Greece, in the land of Thessaly, a saga of a completely different nature was brewing. It would not be the story of a man against a monster, but rather that of a crew against the known world, an expedition that would become the archetype of all epic journeys, the quest for the Golden Fleece. The context of this odyssey is a palace intrigue. In the city of Iolcus, the rightful king Aeson had been deposed by his ambitious half-brother Pelias. Fearing for the life of his only son and heir, Jason, Aeson secretly sent him to be raised by the wise centaur Chiron. 20 years later, an oracle warned the paranoid King Pelias to beware of a man who would arrive at his court wearing a single sandal. Fate, with its characteristic irony, set in motion. Jason, now a man, returned to Iolcus to claim his right to the throne. While crossing a swollen river, he helped an elderly woman to cross, losing one of his sandals in the mud. That elderly woman was none other than the goddess Hera, in disguise, who from that moment would become his divine protector. When Jason presented himself before Pelias, the king saw the prophecy fulfilled, and terror seized him. Here the fundamental resolutions are forged. Pelias, a master of political manipulation, could not simply assassinate the popular and handsome claimant. Instead, he devised a brilliant and lethal plan. He promised Jason the throne, but only if he proved his worth by undertaking an impossible mission: to travel to distant and barbaric Colchis at the eastern edge of the Black Sea and bring back the Golden Fleece. This was the fleece of a sacred winged ram, said to guarantee prosperity to whoever possessed it and guarded by a dragon that never slept. Pelias's decision was a death sentence disguised as a heroic feat. Jason's resolution on his part was to accept the challenge. His acceptance marked the beginning of the greatest gathering of heroes that the ancient world had ever seen. The unfolding of events began with the construction of an unprecedented ship, the Argo, named in honor of its builder Argus. Under the guidance of Athena, a piece of wood from the sacred oak of Dodona, which had the gift of prophecy, was inserted into its prow. At Jason's call came the greatest names of the heroic age: Heracles with his superhuman strength, Orpheus, whose singing could enchant stones, the twins Castor and Pollux, the seer Phineus, and dozens more. They were the Argonauts. Their journey across the seas was a succession of enigmas and dangers. They fought against the terrible Harpies, winged creatures that tormented King Phineus, and in return, he revealed to them the secret to overcoming their next obstacle, the clashing rocks, two enormous floating cliffs that crashed into each other, crushing any ship that attempted to pass. Following Phineus's advice, they released a dove. The rocks closed in on it, trapping only the feathers of its tail. As they separated again, the Argonauts rowed with all their might, surpassing the passage just as the rocks crashed together again, barely grazing the stern of the Argo. Finally, they arrived in Colchis, ruled by King Aeetes. Like Peleus, Aeetes despised foreigners and imposed impossible trials in exchange for the fleece. They had to plough a field using 2 bulls with bronze hooves that breathed fire and sow in it the teeth of a dragon. But here intervened a force that Aeetes had not foreseen, his own daughter, the sorceress Medea. In love with Jason by the work of the goddesses Hera and Aphrodite, Medea resolved to betray her father and her homeland. She provided Jason with an ointment that protected him from the fire of the bulls and warned him that from the teeth of the dragon would spring an army of skeletal warriors. Jason followed her instructions, threw a stone among them, and the warriors, confused, killed each other. That night, Medea guided Jason to the sacred grove where, using her magical arts, she put the guardian dragon to sleep, allowing Jason to finally seize the legendary Golden Fleece. The immediate consequences of this act were turbulent and bloody. Their flight from Colchis was a desperate chase marked by betrayal and murder. Upon returning to Iolcus, Jason presented the fleece to Peleus, but the usurper refused to keep his word. The victory seemed hollow. It was then that the inherent darkness of their journey fully manifested. Medea, in an act of terrible cunning, convinced Peleus's daughters that she could rejuvenate their father if they dismembered him and boiled his remains in a cauldron. The deception worked, and Peleus died at the hands of his own offspring. However, this horrendous regicide caused Jason and Medea to be repudiated and exiled from Iolcus, turning the hero who had united Greece into a pariah. And here lies the central enigma of the chapter. The expedition was a resounding success. The Argonauts overcame all obstacles and obtained the prize. But the final outcome was exile, disgrace, and a trail of blood that stretched from the Black Sea to the heart of Greece. Was the Golden Fleece a true blessing or a cursed relic that corrupted all who coveted it? The story of Jason leaves us with a shadow of doubt, a reminder that heroic glory often comes at a devastating price, and that the decisions made in the heat of adventure can seal a tragic fate. The shadow of exile and betrayal would loom over Jason and Medea, a dark echo that fate, once set in motion, often leads to paths from which there is no return. A truth that another royal house, that of Thebes, was about to discover in the most devastating way imaginable. While Jason and his Argonauts sailed the seas in search of external treasure, another type of quest, a much darker and more personal one, was about to unfold in the heart of Greece. It was not a search for glory, but a desperate flight from a fate that had already been sealed, a story that would become the archetype of tragedy, that of King Oedipus. Our story begins in the powerful city of Thebes, a polis with a lineage stained with blood and prodigies since its founding by Cadmus. Years later, the city was ruled by King Laius and his wife, Queen Jocasta. Thebes thrived. Its walls of 7 gates were a symbol of its strength, but a shadow loomed over the royal palace, the absence of an heir. This dynastic anxiety, a fundamental concern for any monarch of antiquity, led Laius to take a path that would alter the course of his life and that of his city forever. He traveled to the sacred center of the world, to the Oracle of Delphi, to ask the gods about his lineage. There, in the sanctuary of Apollo, the Pythia pronounced one of the most terrible prophecies in all of mythology. It was not a promise, but an unrelenting warning. If Laius fathered a son, that child would grow up to kill his own father and marry his own mother. This divine sentence was not a mere prediction. It was a mechanism set in motion. Terrified, Laius made a resolution that, in his attempt to outsmart fate, became his main instrument. When Jocasta gave birth to a boy, the king, in an act of desperate cruelty, ordered that the child's ankles be pierced and that he be abandoned on Mount Cithaeron to die. But fate, or perhaps human compassion, intervened. The servant tasked with the job, unable to commit such an atrocity, delivered the baby to a shepherd from neighbouring Corinth. This shepherd, in turn, took him to his own king, Polybus, and to Queen Merope, who, without children of their own, adopted him and raised him as their heir, naming him Oedipus, which means swollen feet, a constant echo of a past he was unaware of. Oedipus grew up in Corinth, ignorant of his true origins, but the truth, like a buried seed, always finds a way to sprout. During a banquet, a drunken noble mocked him, calling him a bastard. Doubt settled in the heart of the young prince. His adoptive parents denied it, but the seed of mystery had already been planted. Like his biological father before him, Oedipus embarked on the journey to Delphi in search of answers, and there the oracle repeated the same horrifying prophecy. He would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified and believing that Polybus and Merope were his true parents, Oedipus made the most logical and tragic resolution of his life, to flee Corinth to protect them. Running directly toward the fate he was trying to evade, at a crossroads, a symbolic place of choice and fatality, his chariot encountered that of another traveler, an arrogant noble who demanded that Oedipus yield. A dispute erupted, swords were drawn, and in the fury of the moment, Oedipus killed the man and nearly all of his entourage. Unbeknownst to him, he had just fulfilled the first half of the prophecy. The man who lay dead on the road was Laius, his father, the king of Thebes. Continuing his journey, Oedipus arrived at the gates of Thebes and found it engulfed in terror. The city was being ravaged by the Sphinx, a monster with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the head of a woman who devoured anyone unable to solve her riddle. With the throne vacant, the regent Creon had promised the kingdom and the hand of the widowed queen Jocasta to whoever freed Thebes from the beast. Oedipus, a man of sharp intellect, confronted the Sphinx. What creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 at noon, and on 3 in the evening? His answer: man, was correct. The Sphinx, defeated, threw herself from her rock and died. Oedipus was hailed as a savior. He became king of Thebes and married Jocasta, his mother. The prophecy had been fulfilled in its entirety, hidden in plain sight beneath the veil of heroism and ignorance. For years, Oedipus ruled with wisdom and justice. He had 4 children with Jocasta, 2 sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. But the truth of his origin was a festering wound in the soul of the city. A terrible plague descended upon Thebes, a corruption that reflected the hidden corruption in the royal bed. Oedipus, the diligent king, vowed to find the murderer of the former king Laius to purify the land. Thus, he initiated an unrelenting investigation, a hunt that, unbeknownst to him, had himself as the prey. The truth was unveiled piece by piece, the terrifying revelation of the blind prophet Tiresias, the testimony of a messenger from Corinth who confirmed that Oedipus was adopted, and finally the confession of the old shepherd who had saved his life on the mountain. Realizing that he had married his mother and fathered his own siblings, Jocasta hanged herself. Oedipus, upon discovering her body, tore the brooches from her dress and gouged out his eyes, declaring that he no longer deserved to see the light of the sun after having been blind to such a monstrous truth. The impact was immediate and devastating. A king hailed as a savior became a contaminated pariah, a blind exile wandering through Greece guided by his daughter Antigone. His children would inherit not a kingdom, but a curse that would lead them to destroy one another. The enigma that Oedipus leaves behind is not that of the Sphinx, but one much deeper that has resonated through the centuries. Was he a victim of an inescapable fate woven by the gods? Or was it his own nature, his anger at the crossroads, his relentless intelligence in the pursuit of truth that led him to his downfall? Is it possible to escape what is written, or does every step we take to avoid it bring us closer to the predestined end? The shadow of the house of Laius would loom over Thebes for generations, an echo of how the faults of kings can lead to the ruin of their cities. But hundreds of miles away, another royal house, that of Priam in Troy, was about to unleash a catastrophe of an even greater scale, not due to an ignored prophecy, but because of a judgment of beauty and a divine promise that would ignite the most famous war of antiquity. If the fate of Oedipus was a tragic knot woven for a single man, the Trojan War was a web of predestined catastrophes that would ensnare entire nations. From the ashes of a king's personal tragedy, the tale of a conflict emerges that would define an era. A war so monumental that its echoes still resonate in the depths of our collective memory. Its origin, however, is not found on a battlefield, but in a divine celebration tinged with vanity. The context places us in a world of Mycenaean kingdoms at the height of their power. A confederation of Achaean city-states led by the ambitious king Agamemnon of Mycenae dominated the Aegean. Across the sea in western Anatolia stood the city of Troy, or Ilium, a formidable power protected by impregnable walls and enriched by its control over the trade routes of the Hellespont. Between these two powers existed a latent tension, a geopolitical rivalry that only needed a spark to ignite. Myth tells us that this spark was cast by the gods. At the wedding of the hero Peleus and the nymph Thetis, all the gods were invited except Eris, the goddess of discord. Offended, she threw among the guests a golden apple inscribed "For the fairest." Here is where the resolutions of gods and mortals seal the fate of thousands. 3 goddesses claimed the apple: Hera, wife of Zeus and queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Zeus, in a decision of calculated political neutrality, refused to judge and delegated the task to a mortal, Paris, a prince of Troy who lived as a shepherd. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised him dominion over Asia, Athena victory in every battle. But Aphrodite offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, queen of Sparta. Paris's choice, driven by personal desire rather than political or military ambition, was to give the apple to Aphrodite. It was a choice that would resonate like a death sentence. Shortly thereafter, during a diplomatic visit to Sparta, Paris, with the help of the goddess, seduced or abducted Helen and set sail with her to Troy, taking with him part of the Spartan treasure. The unfolding of events was inexorable. Menelaus, king of Sparta and wronged husband of Helen, turned to his brother Agamemnon. He saw in the offense the perfect justification to launch the military campaign he had long desired. He invoked the oath of Tyndareus, a pact by which all of Helen's former suitors had sworn to defend her chosen husband. One by one, the Achaean kings and heroes, including Odysseus of Ithaca and the demigod Achilles, were compelled to unite their forces. A fleet of more than 1,000 ships gathered at Aulis, a bloody prelude that demanded, according to myth, the sacrifice of Iphigenia, Agamemnon's own daughter, to appease the gods and obtain favourable winds. For 10 long years, the Achaean army besieged the walls of Troy. The war became a bloody stalemate, a succession of heroic duels, brutal skirmishes, and divine intrigues. Heroes from both sides, such as Hector for the Trojans and Ajax for the Achaeans, fell in battle, while the gods took sides, directly interfering in the combat. The death of Hector at the hands of Achilles seemed to seal the city's fate. But its walls still stood. Raw strength had failed. The solution would come from cunning. Odysseus devised a bold plan to build a gigantic wooden horse as an offering to the gods and feign a retreat. The immediate consequences of the Trojan decision to accept the gift were catastrophic. Despite the warnings of the prophetess Cassandra and the priest Laocoon, King Priam and his council ordered that the horse be brought into the city. Under the cover of night, the Greek soldiers hidden inside emerged, opened the city gates to their army, and unleashed a massacre. Troy was sacked, burned, and reduced to rubble. Its men were killed, and its women and children enslaved. The great city that had defied the Achaeans for a decade fell in a single night of deception and violence. For the victors, however, the victory was bitter. Many of the heroes faced a tortuous and tragic return home. pursued by the wrath of the gods, offended by the brutality of the plunder. And here lies the great enigma of the chapter, the mystery of Troy itself. For centuries it was considered a mere stage of legend. But in the late 19th century, the archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann excavated at the hill of Hisarlik in present-day Turkey and discovered the ruins of a city that matched the Homeric descriptions, with multiple layers of destruction and reconstruction. Archaeological evidence suggests that a late Bronze Age city, identified as Troy Scythia, was violently destroyed around 1180 before Christ. Was this the War of Homer? Or was it a more mundane conflict over trade routes and resources, whose memory was magnified by generations of poets until it became an epic of gods and heroes? The line between historical fact and mythical fiction remains one of the greatest enigmas of antiquity. But to truly understand the balance of power that tilted on the plains of Troy, we must isolate the most volatile catalyst of the entire conflict, a man whose personal fury became the axis upon which the fate of the war turned. We must closely examine the wrath of Achilles. And so, with the walls of Troy as the backdrop of a decade of siege, the conflict that arose from the judgment of a prince and the abduction of a queen was about to be hijacked by a force much more earthly and visceral: the wrath of a single man. The war had reached a stalemate, a bloody deadlock where glory was measured in inches of ground gained and lost. In the Achaean camp, the air was not only thick with the stench of death, but also with the miasma of a plague sent by Apollo, a divine punishment for the offense of its leader. This was the tense and volatile scene in the 9th year of the war, a powder keg of pride and desperation waiting for the spark that would ignite it. And that spark was about to be kindled in the heart of the greatest of its warriors. The actors in this imminent drama were two colossi of Greek ambition. On one side, Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and supreme commander of the Achaean forces, a man whose power resided in authority and lineage, but whose arrogance often clouded his judgment. On the other, Achilles, the invincible leader of the Myrmidons, son of a goddess, a warrior whose worth in battle was the pillar upon which the morale of the army rested. The conflict erupted when the seer Calchas revealed that the plague would only cease if Agamemnon returned his captive Chryseis to her father, a priest of Apollo. Pressured by his men, Agamemnon agreed, but his wounded pride demanded compensation, and his gaze fell upon Briseis, the slave and war prize of Achilles. Agamemnon's resolve to seize Briseis was not a mere act of greed, it was a public humiliation, a direct challenge to the honor of Achilles, to his time. Achilles' response was as swift as it was devastating. He drew his sword, halted only by the invisible intervention of the goddess Athena, but his words were sharper than any steel. He announced his withdrawal from the fight. He and his Myrmidons would no longer raise a weapon in favor of Agamemnon. He sat by his black ships, gazing at the sea, while his mother, the sea nymph Thetis, ascended to Olympus to ask Zeus to punish the Achaean arrogance, and the king of the gods listened. Without Achilles, the balance of the war tilted dramatically. The Trojans, led by Prince Hector, broke through the Greek defenses, pushing them to the very shore, threatening to burn their fleet and end the expedition once and for all. Panic seized the camp. Agamemnon, desperate, sent an embassy led by the cunning Odysseus to offer Achilles a fortune in gifts and the return of Briseis if he returned to battle. But Achilles, in a speech that resonates through the ages, rejected the offer. His wound was not material, it was an affront to his very essence. The unfolding events rushed toward tragedy. Patroclus, Achilles' dearest companion, could not bear to witness the slaughter of his friends. He pleaded with Achilles to allow him to join the fight, donning his divine armor to instill fear in the Trojans. Achilles, moved, agreed, but gave him a crucial warning: to repel the Trojans from the ships, but not to pursue them to the walls of Troy. Drunk on initial success, Patroclus forgot the warning. In his fury, he went too far and met his fate at the hands of Hector, who dealt the mortal blow. The news of Patroclus's death reached Achilles like thunder that shattered his world. His wrath, once a proud and contained offense, transformed into a whirlwind of pain and a thirst for vengeance that consumed everything. The cry that erupted from his throat froze the blood of men and gods alike. The consequences were immediate and terrible. Achilles reconciled with Agamemnon, accepting the armor forged by the god Hephaestus, and returned to the battlefield. But he was no longer a hero fighting for glory. He was a force of nature, an angel of death. His fury was so immense that the river Scamander was choked with the corpses of the Trojans he slaughtered, to the point that the river god himself rose against him. His sole objective was Hector. The final duel between the two champions was the climax of the war. Achilles, relentless, chased Hector around the walls of Troy before ending his life. But his vengeance did not end there. In an act of desecration that horrified even the gods, he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it through the dust, denying him the funeral rites. Achilles' wrath had saved the Achaeans, but at a terrible cost to his own humanity. Here lies the central enigma of his legend. Was Achilles' wrath merely the outburst of a wounded ego, or the tragic echo of a demigod struggling to find his place in a mortal world? Caught between ephemeral glory and an inescapable fate? His fury changed the course of the war, but it also sealed his own mortality, revealing the fragility that lies even in the heart of the greatest of heroes. The echo of his anger haunts us, an eternal question about the price of honor and the destructive nature of vengeance. But as Achilles' fate was sealed on the plains of Troy, that of another hero, a cunning and patient king, was just beginning to unfold. His war would not end with the fall of the city, but would give way to an odyssey that would define his legend. A long and tortuous journey home. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. With the fall of Troy and the shadow of Achilles still looming over its ruins, the victorious Achaeans believed that the end of their suffering had arrived. But for one of them, the cunning king of Ithaca, the war had merely changed its stage. The battlefield of Ilium was replaced by the vast and relentless expanse of the Aegean Sea, a blank canvas upon which the gods would paint one of the most enduring epics of human history. For Odysseus, the journey home, his Nostos would not be a simple return, but a 10-year odyssey that would strip him of everything but his wits and his will to survive. The context of the Mediterranean after the Trojan War was one of chaos and readjustment. Empires had fallen, alliances had unraveled, and once secure trade routes were now an uncertain territory plagued by pirates and opportunistic kingdoms. In this sea of anarchy, Odysseus, the man of 1,000 tricks, set sail with his 12 ships and his loyal crew, veterans hardened by a decade of siege. The fundamental resolution that sealed his fate, however, was neither military nor political, but an act of pure arrogance. After a first and bloody encounter in the land of the Cicones, an echo of the brutality of Troy that refused to fade, the true challenge began. The development of his journey became a catalogue of the fears and temptations that lurk at the edges of the known world. First, the land of the lotus eaters whose fruit offered the sweetest of poisons, forgetfulness, a tranquil paradise that threatened to erase the memory of Ithaca, of Penelope, of Telemachus. Odysseus had to drag his men back to the ships, reminding them that the purpose was not to escape the past, but to return to a future. But the deepest enigma awaited on the island of the Cyclopes. There, the confrontation with Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, became the turning point. Odysseus's resolve to blind the giant was a masterpiece of strategy, but his subsequent choice to shout his true name while fleeing was an act of fatal pride. By revealing his identity, he not only earned the eternal wrath of the god of the sea, but transformed his journey from a difficult crossing to a divine pursuit. From that moment on, the sea became his personal enemy. Aeolus, the keeper of the winds, offered him a safe passage home, a gift that the distrust and greed of his own crew cast overboard. On the island of Aea, the sorceress Circe turned his men into pigs. a haunting metaphor for how men can lose their humanity to primal pleasures. Odysseus, protected by Hermes, subdued her, yet still remained an entire year under her spell, a delay that remains a subject of debate. To find the way, Circe sent him to the darkest place possible, the underworld. His descent into Hades to consult the prophet Tiresias is one of the darkest passages of the myth, a journey to the heart of death to learn how to live. The consequences of this odyssey were devastating. Each trial decimated his crew and resources. The deadly song of the Sirens, which promised absolute knowledge in exchange for life, was overcome thanks to the wax in his men's ears and his own binding to the mast. A symbol of the struggle between curiosity and self-preservation. Then came the impossible choice to sail close to Scylla, the six-headed monster that would devour 6 of his men, or risk being completely swallowed by the whirlpool of Charybdis. Odysseus chose the lesser evil, sacrificing part of his crew to save the rest, a leadership decision whose scars he would carry forever. Finally, after the desecration of the sacred cattle of Helios by his desperate men, a final storm annihilated his last ship and the last of his companions. Odysseus, the great king and general, was reduced to a solitary castaway, clinging to a piece of wood. He arrived at the island of Ogygia, where the nymph Calypso held him for 7 years, offering him immortality and eternal love. Here lies the central enigma of his journey. Why would a man who had fought so fiercely to return home linger so long at the edge of his goal? Was he truly a prisoner? Or was this pause a necessary final purge of his ego, a period of forced reflection for the man who had lost everything? His journey does not seem to be merely a divine punishment, but a crucible designed to burn the hero of Troy and forge the man capable of reclaiming his home, not with the sword, but with the wisdom and humility earned through suffering. The Odyssey reveals itself not as a geographical map, but as a journey into the depths of the human soul. The wrath of a god had sealed Odysseus's fate for a decade, a reminder of the Olympian power to punish. However, divine intervention did not always manifest through fury and vengeance. Sometimes it took a more subtle yet equally transformative form, desire, a force embodied by a goddess whose influence over gods and mortals would rewrite destinies with the same ease with which Odysseus had lost his way. A force that we will explore in the whimsical and often dangerous Loves of Aphrodite. As the echo of Odysseus's exploits faded on the shores of Ithaca, in the heights of Olympus, the passions that had ignited the very Trojan War continued to burn with an unyielding intensity. If war was the grand stage for mortal heroes, its deep-rooted causes resided in the whims and affections of the immortals, and no deity embodied the power of desire with all its glories and dangers quite like Aphrodite. Olympus, more than a home, was a board of power where marriages often served as strategic alliances. In this complex political environment, the arrival of Aphrodite, born from the foam of the sea in a burst of primordial beauty, represented a challenge. Her power did not lie in brute strength or strategic wisdom, but in a more subtle and perhaps more dangerous influence, irresistible attraction. To contain this potentially destabilizing force, Zeus's resolution was pragmatic and ultimately disastrous. He gave Aphrodite in marriage to Hephaestus, the lame and austere god of the forge, master of fire and craftsmanship. It was a union of opposites. Perfect beauty bound to imperfect labor, desire chained to work. But how could a force as primordial as desire be contained by a mere marital vow? The answer soon manifested itself. The central character of this divine drama was, of course, Aphrodite herself, whose very nature prevented her from submitting. Her choice was not so much a calculated betrayal as an inevitable expression of her being. Beside her stood Hephaestus, the humiliated husband, whose reaction would not be one of impulsive violence but of methodical and artisanal revenge. And as a catalyst, Ares, the god of war, impetuous and virile, the exact antithesis of Hephaestus. The attraction between Aphrodite and Ares echoed the cosmos itself, the union of beauty and brutality. Their clandestine encounters became the secret gossip of Olympus, Under the cloak of night, while Hephaestus tirelessly worked at his forge, the god of war visited the bed of the goddess of love. But the sun, Helios, saw all from his celestial chariot. His eyes witnessed the infidelity, and feeling loyalty towards the hard-working Hephaestus, he revealed the truth. The resolution of the god of the forge was not that of a warrior, but that of a wounded craftsman. At the heart of his volcano, he did not forge a weapon to kill, but a trap to humiliate. With unparalleled skill, he wove a net of bronze threads as fine as a spider's web, but stronger than any chain, and laid it over his marital bed, invisible to the untrained eye. One night, when Ares and Aphrodite lay entwined, the trap closed. The invisible net fell upon them, immobilizing them instantly. Hephaestus's revenge was not yet complete. With a shout that resonated throughout Olympus, he summoned the other gods to witness the scene. The shame was monumental. Apollo and Hermes exchanged jokes about whether it was worth suffering such humiliation to be with the goddess, while Poseidon, more solemn, negotiated Ares' release in exchange for paying the adulterer's dowry. Finally, the lovers were freed, each fleeing to a remote region, marked not by a physical wound but by the scar of public exposure. The consequences of this episode reveal much about Olympic morality. There was no lasting punishment. Divine life continued, but the myth left an indelible echo about the nature of love and marriage. Yet Aphrodite's influence was not confined to the golden halls of Olympus. Her power extended with equal or greater force over the world of mortals. From her union with the mortal Anchises would be born Aeneas, Trojan hero and legendary founder of the Roman lineage, an act of love that would alter the course of Western history. However, her most famous and tragic love was with a mortal of legendary beauty, Adonis. So beautiful was the young hunter that Aphrodite herself became enamored, even competing with Persephone, the queen of the underworld, for his affection. Zeus decreed that Adonis would spend part of the year with each. But this happiness was fragile. On a fateful hunting day, Adonis was mortally wounded by a boar, sent, according to some versions, by a jealous Ares. Aphrodite's grief was so profound that from the blood of her beloved sprang the anemone, a flower of ephemeral beauty, an eternal symbol of her lost love. Here lies the central enigma of the chapter. The legacy of Aphrodite's loves is a paradox. On one hand, it is a life-generating force and a lineage of heroes that would found civilizations. On the other, it is a chaotic passion that provokes jealousy, wars, and deep tragedy. The mystery of Aphrodite resides in this duality. Was she a deity of creative love, aware of the fate her unions forged, or an elemental and indifferent force whose whims sowed both life and destruction, leaving gods and mortals alike at the mercy of its consequences? This whirlwind of passions and uncertain destinies left mortals in a state of perpetual anxiety, faced with the overwhelming force of love and desire, unable to foresee whether it would lead them to glory or ruin. They longed for guidance, a sign that would allow them to navigate the turbulent waters of the fate that the gods wove. And in that search for certainty, all eyes turned towards a source of infallible knowledge, towards the enigmatic prophecies of Apollo. If the whims of love embodied by Aphrodite demonstrated the unpredictability of fate, there existed another divine force that offered an illusion of control over that very future, a voice that promised to unveil the invisible threads weaving the lives of mortals and kings. It was not passion, but prophecy, and at the heart of this power was the most complex of the Olympic gods, Apollo. In an archaic Greek world marked by the uncertainty of harvests, the constant threat of war between city-states, and the fragility of life, the need for certainty was a driving force. It was in this breeding ground of anxiety and hope that a place became the spiritual epicenter of the known world, Delphi, nestled on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. This sanctuary was not always the domain of Apollo. Ancient legends whisper that it first belonged to Mother Earth, Gaia, and was guarded by her daughter, the serpent Python. The myth of Apollo's arrival is a story of conquest. The young god, radiant and terrible, descends to the site and slays the monstrous serpent with his silver arrows. This act is not merely a heroic feat, it is a symbol of the new Olympic order of light and reason triumphing over the primordial and chthonic forces of the earth. By establishing his oracle upon the remains of his enemy, Apollo claimed for himself the most coveted power, the knowledge of the future. The key figures in this mystical drama formed a triumvirate of power. First, Apollo himself, the absent yet omnipresent deity, whose will was the source of all truth. Second, the Pythia, an elected priestess, a woman who had to lead a pure life and acted as the mortal channel for the voice of the god. And third, perhaps the most influential in practical terms, the priests of Delphi. They were the ones who managed the sanctuary, interpreted the disjointed words of the Pythia in trance, and shaped them into the ambiguous verses that would be delivered to the seekers. The process was a ritual in itself. Kings, generals, and common citizens traveled for weeks bringing offerings to win the favor of the god, after purifying themselves in the waters of the Castalian spring. They performed a sacrifice. If the omens were favorable, they were allowed to enter the heart of the temple, the Aditon, where the Pythia, seated on a tripod over a fissure in the rock, awaited. It is said that she chewed sacred laurel leaves and inhaled the vapors emanating from the earth, entering a state of divine ecstasy. It was in this state that she uttered some of the most decisive prophecies in history and mythology. King Croesus of Lydia, one of the richest men in the world, asked the oracle whether he should attack the rising Persian Empire. The response, carefully crafted by the priests, was a perfect riddle. If you cross the river Halys, you will destroy a great empire. Encouraged, Croesus launched his campaign. The immediate consequence was total ruin. The great empire he destroyed was, to his misfortune, his own. The oracle had never lied, but its truth was shrouded in a fog of interpretation. Similarly, it was this voice that sealed the fate of Oedipus, declaring that he would kill his father and marry his mother, setting in motion the tragedy long before he had the chance to avoid it. The Oracle of Delphi became a geopolitical power. Its edicts legitimized the founding of colonies, greenlit declarations of war, and resolved dynastic disputes. Its influence was such that no significant decision was made without first consulting the god. The treasure of Delphi, filled with the offerings of grateful and fearful supplicants, became one of the richest in all of Greece, a tangible testament to the power of the word. And here lies the central enigma that has endured through the centuries. What was the true nature of the voice of Delphi? Modern geological research has revealed the existence of faults beneath the temple that could have released intoxicating gases such as ethylene with hallucinogenic properties. Was the Pythia simply a woman in a chemically induced trance, whose ramblings were skillfully manipulated by a priestly caste with a keen political awareness? Or is there something more that science cannot explain, an echo of ancient wisdom resonating in that sacred place? The mystery lies not only in the origin of the prophecies, but in their persuasive power. Ambiguity was their greatest strength, allowing every outcome, no matter how disastrous, to be interpreted as a confirmation of the god's omniscience. Was it the voice of a god, the effects of underground gases, or the echo of human cunning amplified by faith and desperation? But in the face of the enigma of a destiny dictated in whispers and riddles, another Olympic deity offered a different path. Not that of prophecy, but that of reason, strategy, and applied wisdom, a beacon of clarity in a world of shadows, whose power resided not in predicting the future, but in forging it with intelligence, the wisdom of Athena. And while the prophecies of Apollo offered an enigmatic map of destiny traced with the ink of ambiguity, another form of wisdom, more pragmatic and direct, emerged from Olympus to guide mortals. It was not a wisdom of riddles, but of strategy, not of premonitions, but of calculated action. It was the light of reason in a world often governed by impulse and passion. We entered an era in which the Greek city-states, such as Athens, Sparta and Thebes fiercely competed for earthly supremacy, reflecting the very rivalries of the divine pantheon. In this geopolitical chessboard, brute force, embodied by Ares, often led to mutual destruction. But a new power was on the rise: strategic intelligence, craftsmanship, and civilized governance. This was the domain of Athena, and her influence would begin to shape the destiny of Western civilization in ways that still resonate today. Her emergence was not an accident, but a response to the need for order in a cosmos still young and chaotic, a counterbalance to blind fury and unbridled desire. The central figure of this paradigm shift is Athena herself, whose conception and birth are an enigma in themselves. The fundamental resolution was made by Zeus, the king of the gods. Warned by an oracle that the child he would have with the titaness Métis, the personification of prudence, would dethrone him, Zeus made a drastic decision. He swallowed Métis herself. But wisdom cannot simply be consumed and forgotten. Within the head of Zeus, the essence of Métis and her unborn daughter continued to exist. The key characters in this story are, therefore, a father fearful of his own lineage and a mother whose intelligence became her own prison. Zeus's resolution to nullify the prophecy by force rather than by ingenuity would have an unexpected and monumental consequence. The unfolding of events is one of the most singular myths of the Greek pantheon. After swallowing Métis, Zeus was consumed by an unbearable headache, a pounding that threatened to split his divine skull. Desperate, he ordered Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths, to open his head with his axe. From the open wound did not flow blood, but a fully formed figure. Athena, adult, clad in shining armor, wielding a spear and letting out a war cry that shook the foundations of Olympus. Born directly from the mind of the king of the gods, she was the embodiment of pure intelligence, free from the passions of mortal birth. This origin defined her character, a virgin goddess, whose loyalty was to her father and to the principles of reason and justice. Her wisdom was not merely theoretical. It manifested in concrete actions. In the mythical competition for the patronage of the most important city of Attica, she faced her uncle Poseidon, while the god of the sea, in an act of violent power, struck the Acropolis with his trident and caused a spring of salt water to gush forth. Useless for the citizens, Athena's resolution was to plant an olive tree, a gift of peace, sustenance, and trade. The Athenians, in a decision that would define their identity, chose her gift, and the city adopted her name, Athens. The immediate consequences of her influence were profound. As the protector of heroes, her intervention was always strategic. She did not grant brute strength like Heracles, but the tools of intellect. To Perseus, she provided a polished shield like a mirror so he could behead Medusa without looking directly at her, using the reflection to evade her petrifying power. To Odysseus, the hero whose cunning already made him her favorite, she guided him during the 10 years of his tortuous return to Ithaca, advising him, disguising him, and helping him plan every move. Athena did not fight the battles for them, she taught them how to win them. Under her patronage, Athens became the beacon of philosophy, democracy, and the arts. And the olive tree transformed into a sacred symbol of peace and prosperity throughout the Mediterranean. But her wisdom had a dark side, a blade as sharp as her spear. The story of Arachne, a mortal weaver who boasted of being superior to the goddess, reveals an absolute intolerance for hubris, for human arrogance. After a contest in which Arachne wove a tapestry depicting the infidelities of the gods, an enraged Athena transformed her into the first spider, condemning her to weave forever. And here lies the central enigma of her figure. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and civilization, but she is also a goddess of war. Athena Prometheus, the one who fights on the front lines. Unlike Ares, who revels in slaughter, she represents just war, the strategy that minimizes losses and ensures victory. It was she who inspired the idea of the Trojan horse, a masterpiece of deception that ended a decade of siege. Was Athena the embodiment of pure reason, a force for order and progress? Or did a will as relentless as that of any other god hide behind her shining helmet? A cold intelligence that calculated victory regardless of the human cost, where justice and vengeance were two sides of the same divine coin. Her legacy is a paradox. The mind that builds cities is also the mind that designs their destruction. And while heroes fought and cities thrived under the gaze of the owl-eyed goddess, all from the wisest king to the bravest warrior shared an inescapable fate, a final journey that did not lead to Olympus, but to the deep shadows of a realm ruled by a silent and feared god, the kingdom of Hades. But while the wisdom of Athena illuminated the world of the living, protecting cities and guiding heroes under the light of the sun, an entire kingdom existed in perpetual shadow, a realm that no mortal sought and from which few returned. This was the third great realm of the cosmos, allotted after the fall of the Titans, a lot that fell to the most reserved and feared of the Olympic brothers. We now delve into the enigma of the underworld. The kingdom of Hades. The mythological context places us right after the Titanomachy. Zeus claimed the heavens, Poseidon the seas, and Hades was assigned the vast and silent underground world. It was not a choice, but the result of a distribution of power that would define the cosmic order. For the Greek mind, this was not a place of fire and brimstone in the style of later religions, but an inevitable destination. A somber echo of life. It was a place of strict order, ruled by a king whose main characteristic was not evil, but an absolute and terrifying impartiality. The key figures of this realm are, of course, its king Hades, whose very name was so feared that mortals preferred to call him by epithets such as Pluto, the rich, in reference to the mineral wealth and souls he possessed. His most transcendent resolution, the one that would define his myth forever, was to take a queen. Longing for company on his solitary throne, he set his eyes on Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. It was not a request, but an act of power. The earth opened up, and Hades in his golden chariot abducted the young maiden while she was gathering flowers. This decision not only involved Hades, but also had the tacit approval of Zeus, who saw in this union a way to consolidate family power over all realms. The third crucial figure was Persephone herself, whose final choice, seemingly insignificant, would seal the fate of worlds. The unfolding of events became a cosmic crisis. The disappearance of her daughter plunged Demeter into such deep sorrow that she abandoned her divine duties. The earth became barren, the crops withered, and humanity faced famine. The lament of mortals reached Olympus, forcing Zeus to intervene. His decision was to send Hermes the messenger with the order that Hades release Persephone. Hades, respectful of his brother's authority, agreed, but before his queen departed, he offered her one last fruit, a pomegranate. Persephone, whether out of hunger, deception, or a budding affection for her captor, ate a few seeds. This act, seemingly trivial, was binding. An ancient law of the underworld dictated that whoever tasted its food would be bound to it forever. When Persephone returned and confessed to having eaten the seeds, a compromise was reached that would alter the natural world forever. The immediate consequences were the creation of the seasons. During the months that Persephone spent with her mother in the upper world, Demeter rejoiced and the earth flourished. It was spring and summer. But during the third of the year that she had to return to the underworld to reign alongside Hades, Demeter's sorrow brought the cold and darkness of autumn and winter. Beyond this natural cycle, the myth gave rise to the Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most important religious cults of ancient Greece, which promised its initiates a blissful life after death, inspired by Persephone's journey. The journey of a soul to the realm of Hades was a meticulously structured process. First, it had to cross the river Acheron, paying an obol to the gloomy ferryman Charon. Then it had to pass before Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the gates, allowing entry to all but exit to none. Finally, the soul was judged by three semi-divine kings, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Depending on its life, it was sent to one of three places: The fields of asphodel for common souls, a monotonous existence without memory, Tartarus, an abyss of punishment for great sinners such as the Titans, or the Elysian fields, an island of bliss for heroes and the just. This leaves us with the central enigma of the chapter. Hades is often portrayed as a villain, a sinister captor. However, myths rarely depict him as an unjust or malicious god. His realm has laws and he enforces them with unyielding rigidity. He does not seek to overthrow Zeus or disturb the world of the living, he simply governs his domain. Was Hades a monstrous god or merely a misunderstood ruler, fulfilling the most thankless duty of the cosmos? Is his realm a place of torment or, more profoundly, a reflection of the Greek acceptance that death is not a punishment, but an orderly, silent, and inevitable conclusion? The mystery is not whether the underworld existed, but what it truly represented in the heart and mind of those who told these stories. The realm of Hades, with its unyielding laws and eternal shadows, teaches us that there are forces beyond the control of the gods of Olympus. But the most terrifying darkness does not always reside in the underworld. Sometimes it springs from the human heart, fueled by betrayal and love turned to hate. It is a darkness that can lead a powerful sorceress to commit acts so terrible that they would make even the judges of souls tremble, as the terrible Revenge of Medea would demonstrate. While the mysteries of the underworld governed the fate of souls, a different kind of darkness, forged in human passion and betrayal, was about to be unleashed in the world of the living. This was not a story of monsters in labyrinths or gods on Olympus, but a terrible echo that arises when love turns to ashes and despair becomes a weapon. It is the story of Medea. After the epic quest for the Golden Fleece, Jason and Medea settled in Corinth. The city, a prosperous center of trade and power, offered a temporary refuge. However, the political context was a web of fragile alliances. Jason, despite his heroic fame, was a foreigner without a kingdom of his own. Medea, princess of distant Colchis and sorceress of fearsome reputation, was viewed with a mix of fascination and deep suspicion. In the rigid Greek society, a barbarian woman with arcane powers represented an anomaly, a latent threat to the established order. Stability was bought with strategic marriages, and royal blood was the most valuable currency. It was in this atmosphere of ambition and xenophobia that the seeds of tragedy were sown. The actors in this drama were defined by their ambitions and their limits. On one side, Jason, the hero whose glory was beginning to fade. His fundamental resolution was pragmatic and, in his eyes, logical: to secure his future and that of his children through a new alliance. He decided to repudiate Medea to marry Glauce, the young daughter of Creon, the king of Corinth. For Jason, it was a political move, a way to finally integrate himself into the Greek elite. He completely underestimated the nature of the bond that tied him to Medea, a pact sealed not only with love but with blood and terrible sacrifices. On the other side, Medea. She had betrayed her father, murdered her own brother, and used her magic to secure each of Jason's victories. Her love was absolute, a force of nature. Her resolution upon being betrayed would not be one of passive lamentation, but of total annihilation. And finally, Creon, the king, whose decision to exile Medea and her children was the catalyst. Fearing the power of the scorned sorceress, he acted to protect his family, but in doing so, he granted Medea exactly what she needed: an ultimatum, a deadline of just one day to execute her revenge. The unfolding of events was unleashed with the precision of a dark ritual. Upon learning of her exile, Medea confronted Jason in one of the rawest confrontations of mythology. He, with cold logic, attempted to justify his betrayal as an act of foresight for the well-being of all. She reminded him of the sacred oaths they had made, the crimes he had committed for her. Seeing the futility of his words, Medea changed tactics. She pretended to accept her fate, asking only that her children could stay, and that they be allowed to deliver farewell gifts to the new bride. Jason, blinded by his arrogance and relief, agreed. The gifts were an exquisitely woven tunic and a crown of gold, but in its threads and in its metal, Medea had poured an ancient poison, a corrosive magic that would activate with the heat of the body. When Princess Glaus donned the gifts, the fabric adhered to her skin as if she were on fire. The poison consumed her in indescribable agony. Her father, Creon, in a desperate attempt to save her, embraced her, becoming stuck to her, sharing her horrific end. The palace of Corinth turned into a funeral pyre. The immediate consequences were devastating. The royal house of Corinth was annihilated, but Medea's revenge was not yet finished. To completely destroy Jason, to erase not only his present but also his future, she committed the most unthinkable act. In the climax of her fury and pain, she murdered her own children. It was not an act of impulsive madness, but the calculated conclusion of her plan to strip Jason of his lineage, his legacy, the only immortality that a Greek hero could long for. When Jason arrived, he found only the bodies of his children and Medea rising toward the sky in a chariot drawn by winged dragons, a gift from her grandfather, the sun god Helios. She escaped mortal justice, becoming a spectre, a legend of terror. And here lies the enigma that has endured through the centuries. Was Medea simply a monster, an embodiment of absolute evil, or was she the inevitable consequence of a patriarchal society that used her for her power and exoticism only to discard her when she was no longer convenient? Her story is a dark mirror reflecting the complexities of justice, otherness, and the human capacity for cruelty when pushed beyond all limits. The question of whether she was a victim turned executioner or a demonic force from the beginning remains without a clear answer, suspended in time like an eternal judgment, Medea's escape over the waves. In a chariot drawn by solar dragons was a final and terrible spectacle, a challenge to gods and men. But her journey across the sea was only an echo of the dangers that those very waters held. Long before her revenge, sailors navigating those routes faced a different kind of doom, one that did not come with fire and poison, but with an irresistible and deadly melody, the song of the Sirens. The shadow of Medea's vengeance still loomed over the land of the Hellenes, a brutal reminder of the power unleashed by passion and betrayal. But beyond the shores stained by her fury, in the vast blue of the Aegean Sea, awaited a danger of a different nature. Not one of wrath and fire, but of a silent and lethal seduction, a sound enigma that had claimed countless sailors. In the age of heroes, the sea was not merely a route for trade or conquest. It was the final frontier, a realm of mystery where the laws of men dissolved before the power of gods and monsters. For Greek navigators, each journey was an act of faith and courage. Their fragile wooden ships faced capricious storms, treacherous coasts, and an infinite horizon that could conceal both salvation and ruin. In the long nights at sea, beneath a mantle of indifferent stars, men whispered stories of creatures lurking in the depths. But no tale instilled a terror as particular as that of the Sirens' song. It was not a fear of physical violence, but of the power of a melody capable of stripping a man of his will, his memory, and ultimately, his life. This was the context of dread and superstition in which any captain had to navigate, a world where a sound could be more deadly than any tempest. In this landscape of dangers, two key figures prepared for an inevitable confrontation. On one side, the Sirens, enigmatic creatures whose origin is lost in the mists of myth. Daughters of the river god Achilles and one of the Muses, their lineage marked them as beings of primordial and artistic power. They were not mere monsters, they were guardians of ancient knowledge, and their song, the vehicle of an irresistible temptation. On the other side, Odysseus, the king of Ithaca. His defining trait was not the strength of Heracles nor the fury of Achilles, but his his cunning, his ingenuity, and a curiosity so profound that it often bordered on recklessness. The fundamental resolution did not come from him but from the sorceress Circe, having been his lover and hostess. Circe, in an act of complex respect for Odysseus's mind, warned him of the imminent danger and offered him the key to his survival. Odysseus's resolution, then, was what defined him. he did not simply choose to avoid the sirens. He chose to listen to them. In an act of unprecedented boldness, he decided to confront temptation not with ignorance but with knowledge and restraint, wagering his life and that of his crew for the privilege of being the only man to hear the forbidden song and live to tell the tale. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax, sealing them off from the outside world. To himself, however, he had himself tied tightly to the main mast of the ship, giving strict orders that, no matter how much he pleaded or shouted, they were not to untie him under any circumstances. As their ship approached the island of Anthemuessa, an unnatural silence fell over the sea. The wind ceased, the waves calmed, and then it began. It was not a mere scream, nor a pleasant song. It was a cascade of sound that seemed to weave itself with the deepest desires of the listener. For Odysseus, the hero of Troy, the sirens sang of his own glory, of battles won and enemies defeated. They promised him knowledge not only of the past but of all that was happening and would happen upon the face of the earth. It was the promise of absolute knowing, the ultimate temptation for a mind like his. His body convulsed against the ropes. His brows and gestures implored his men to free him, to let him go to that source of wisdom and ecstasy. But his crew, deaf and loyal, only tightened their bonds, rowing with all their might to distance themselves from the cursed island, whose flowery meadow concealed a macabre truth, piles of human bones and decaying skins, the remains of those who had succumbed before him. When the ship was far enough away and the song faded into a whisper, the men released their leader. The immediate consequence was a legendary triumph. Odysseus had survived. His legend grew not only as a cunning warrior but as an explorer of the limits of human experience. For the Sirens, however, the encounter was fatal. An ancient oracle had predicted that they would die if a mortal managed to hear their song and escape. Overcome by Odysseus's cunning, the creatures, according to some versions of the myth, threw themselves into the sea and became rocks, their power broken forever. The sea, in that small corner of the world, became a little safer, but the echo of their song would remain as an eternal warning, and here lies the true enigma of the chapter. What exactly was the Siren's song? Was it a mere auditory illusion, a melody so beautiful that it drove one to madness? Or was it, as Homer suggests, something much deeper? The Sirens promised to know all that happens upon the fertile earth. Did they perhaps offer a shortcut to omniscience, a truth so overwhelming that no mortal intellect could bear it without disintegrating? The real danger, then, would not have been crashing against the rocks, but the annihilation of the self before the revelation of a forbidden cosmic knowledge. Odysseus heard the beginning of that revelation, but he was torn from it before it could consume him. The mystery that endures is not how the song sounded, but what secrets of the universe were lost forever with the silence of the Sirens. Odysseus's audacity, anchored by the prudence of his plan, allowed him to brush against forbidden knowledge and return to the world of men. His journey to the edge of the abyss was a triumph of cunning over temptation, but the echo of his ambition would resonate in another legend, that of a young man who did not seek the secrets of the sea, but challenged the very limits of the sky, proving that when ambition lacks anchors, the fall is as inevitable as it is dizzying. The Tragedy of Icarus. But if the song of the Sirens was an external seduction, a danger that could be anticipated and avoided, there exists another kind of temptation, more intimate and dangerous, the one that arises from one's own ambition. An impulse that does not require monstrous voices to drag mortals toward their ruin, as demonstrated by the eternal echo of one of the most symbolic tragedies of mythology. We find ourselves on the island of Crete, under the iron rule of King Minos. The splendor of his palace in Knossos hides a grim reality. His power, consolidated after imprisoning the monstrous Minotaur in the labyrinth, has become paranoid and absolute. The architect of this wonder and at the same time prison, the ingenious Athenian Daedalus, has fallen from grace. Minos, fearful that the secret of the labyrinth will be revealed and jealous of his unparalleled genius, has turned the island into a gilded cage for the inventor and his young son Icarus. The king's control over Crete is total. His fleets monitor every mile of sea and his guards patrol every port. For Daedalus, a man whose mind knew no limits, physical limitation had become an unbearable torture. The horizon was not a promise of freedom, but the wall of his cell. In this oppressive environment, two key figures face a resolution that will alter the course of their lives. On one side, Daedalus, the master craftsman, whose analytical mind sees the world as a set of problems to be solved. His decision is not whether to escape, but how. Observing the flight of birds, he conceives a plan as bold as it is sacrilegious. If King Minos rules the land and the sea, he will conquer the only domain left to him, the air. On the other side is Icarus, his son, a young man on the threshold of adulthood, raised in the shadow of his father's genius and the king's power. For him, the plan is not just a means of escape, it is the promise of an unprecedented adventure, the opportunity to transcend his mortal condition and touch the sky. Daedalus's fundamental resolution to challenge the laws of nature and build wings for a man ignited in his son a flame that would soon become uncontrollable. In secret, in the confines of his workshop, father and son began the meticulous task. Daedalus collected feathers of all sizes, from the smallest and softest to the longest and sturdiest. He arranged them with the precision of a geometer, binding them with linen thread at the base and with beeswax in the center, creating two magnificent pairs of wings, an almost perfect replica of those of a great bird. On the day of the escape, as he adjusted the wings to his son's shoulders, Daedalus gave him a warning laden with foreboding. He instructed him to maintain a middle course, for if he flew too low, the moisture of the sea would weigh down the feathers, making them heavy and useless. And if he flew too high, the heat of the sun, the fiery chariot of Helios, would melt the wax that held together his fragile freedom. With tears in his eyes, the father kissed his son, unaware that it would be the last time. They soared together, leaving behind the tyranny of Crete. At first, Icarus obediently followed his father. The sensation was one of indescribable euphoria. Below, fishermen and shepherds looked up at them, mistaking them for gods. This perception fed the young man's pride. His father's warning began to sound like a restriction, not like guidance. The consequences of this intoxication of height were immediate and catastrophic. Driven by a sense of unlimited power, Icarus began to ascend higher and higher, feeling the wind whistle around him, approaching the sun as if it were his equal. Joy transformed into arrogance, but the sun does not tolerate rivals. The relentless heat began to soften the wax. Icarus felt a first tug, a feather coming loose. He flapped his arms harder, but only accelerated the disintegration. The feathers cascaded away and his wings, masterpieces of engineering, disintegrated in the air. For a moment, he flapped his bare arms against the void, his scream drowned out by the wind. Then, the fall. Daedalus, further ahead, heard the scream and turned, but saw only feathers floating on the waves. He landed desperately on a nearby island and searched for his son until the sea cast his body ashore. The inventor who had conquered the sky had lost what he loved most. In his grief, he named that island Icaria, and the sea that had claimed his son the Sea of Icaria. He had escaped from Minos's prison, only to be forever trapped in the prison of his own mourning. The enigma of Icarus does not reside in his fall, but in his ascent. Is his story a simple fable about filial disobedience, or does it conceal a deeper code about the nature of innovation and the price of progress? Was Icarus a victim of his own arrogance, or of the dream of power that his own father bestowed upon him? The myth leaves us with a troubling question. Where does healthy ambition end, and where does self-destructive hubris begin? It is a mystery that resonates in every technological advance and in every generation that seeks to surpass the previous one. The tragedy of Icarus is an eternal echo about the dangers of a very particular intoxication, that of power and unbridled ambition. However, in the Greek pantheon there existed another form of intoxication, a madness more visceral and earthly, unleashed not by the sun but by the fruit of the vine, a ritual madness that would come to be known as the Madness of Dionysus. The tragic fall of Icarus, consumed by the ambition that lifted him too close to the sun, resonates as a warning about the dangers of human arrogance. However, in the annals of Greek myth, there exists another form of fall. Not into the sea, but into the depths of the mind itself, a descent into an abyss where reason dissolves and identity fractures. This is the territory of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and divine madness. The cult of Dionysus, often perceived as foreign and disruptive, infiltrated the social fabric of the Greek city-states, challenging the established order. In cities like Thebes, governed by a strict royal hierarchy and a well-defined pantheon of Olympic gods, the arrival of this god of wild nature represented a direct threat. His rites, celebrated in the darkness of forests and atop mountains, promised a release from social constraints, especially for women confined to the domestic sphere. But what exactly was this madness that he offered? Was it mere intoxication, or something much deeper and more terrifying? The echoes of these questions lead us to the story of Pentheus, king of Thebes. The characters in this tragedy were marked by fate. On one side, Dionysus, son of Zeus and the mortal Semele, returns to Thebes, his hometown, to establish his cult and avenge the honor of his mother, whose divinity had been denied by her own sisters. On the other side, Pentheus, the young king, cousin of Dionysus. He embodies law, order, and reason. His fundamental resolution, one that would seal his fate and that of his lineage, was to categorically reject the new god. For Pentheus, the Dionysian rites were nothing more than a pretext for immorality and chaos, an affront to the authority of the city and to decency. Beside him, figures like the elderly seer Tiresias and his own grandfather Cadmus advised caution, recognizing the danger of challenging a divine force. But Pentheus's decision was inflexible. The unfolding of events spirals inevitably toward catastrophe. Dionysus, disguised as a charismatic priest of his own cult, is arrested by order of Pentheus. But could a mortal, no matter how much of a king he was, imprison a god? The walls of the prison crumble. The chains fall away on their own. The power of Dionysus manifests in miracles that terrify and confuse the palace. Despite the warnings, Pentheus remains steadfast, his skepticism transforming into an obsession to unmask what he considers a fraud. It is here that Dionysus weaves his most subtle trap. Sensing a morbid curiosity beneath the king's facade of righteousness, the god persuades him to disguise himself as a woman and go to the mountains to spy on the secret rites of the Maenads. His frenzied followers, among whom was Pentheus's own mother, Agave. Pentheus's resolution to accept, to yield to his hidden voyeurism, is his downfall. At the summit of Mount Cithaeron, hidden in the crown of a fir tree, he is discovered. Dionysus, with a single command, unleashes the fury of his followers. In their ecstasy induced by the god, the Maenads do not see a disguised king. They see a wild beast, a mountain lion that has profaned their sanctuary. Led by Agave, they pounce on him in a frenzy of ritual violence. In her madness, the mother does not recognize the son who pleads for his life. It is she herself who, with superhuman strength, tears off his head. The immediate consequences are of unbearable cruelty. Agave returns to Thebes in a triumphant procession, carrying the head of Pentheus impaled on her thyrsus, believing it to be the trophy of a glorious hunt. She presents it proudly to her father Cadmus, until slowly the fog of divine madness dissipates. The moment of recognition, the anagnorisis, is one of the most chilling in all of mythology, a mother holding the decapitated head of her own son. The royal lineage of Thebes is destroyed, the family exiled, and the city, subdued by terror, surrenders to the power of the new god. Here lies the central enigma of Dionysus. His cult offered ecstasy, the dissolution of the self and union with the divine, a form of spiritual liberation. However, for those who rejected him, for those who rigidly clung to order and denied the irrational part of existence, the very liberating force became a destructive madness. Is Dionysus a god of joy or of terror? Or are both faces inseparable, two sides of the same primordial coin that lies at the heart of human experience? The Dionysian madness was not simply an absence of reason, but the terrifying presence of another reality, one that demonstrated that human order is fragile and that the gods demand to be recognized at any cost. The brutal retribution of Dionysus served as a terrifying reminder of divine power, but it left a void, a question about the very nature of punishment and reward, this visceral and passionate justice, born of personal offense, contrasted with a deeper need for a system that transcended vengeance. The cosmos longed for a justice that was not the result of whim, but of an immutable and sacred law, a justice whose name resonated in the halls of Olympus. The Justice of Themis. Faced with the unrestrained madness of Dionysus, which threatened to dissolve the foundations of civilization in a whirlwind of ecstasy and violence, the cosmos silently cried out for a counterbalance. A force not of passion, but of principle, not of frenzy, but of equilibrium. From the depths of time, long before the Bacchic madness shook the mortal world, a primordial echo was already resonating in Olympus. A presence that offered the promise of lasting order. In the dawn of the Olympic reign following the brutal Titanomachy, the universe was a conquered territory, but not a pacified one. The power of Zeus was absolute. Forged in war and maintained by the thunderbolt, yet the cosmos still vibrated with the memory of chaos. The laws governing existence were those of brute force, a dangerous echo of the reign of Kronos. In this volatile environment, where the will of a god could alter reality in an instant, the survival of the new divine order and the nascent human world depended on establishing foundations deeper than mere power. It was a moment of definition, where the gods had to decide whether they would be mere immortal tyrants or guardians of a coherent cosmic structure. Human society, a fragile experiment at the mercy of divine whims, watched from the shadows, seeking a pattern, a sign that life was something more than an arbitrary game of the immortals. In this scenario of uncertainty emerged the figures and resolutions that would change the fate of the cosmos. The protagonist of this transformation was not a new generation Olympic goddess, but one of the ancient titanesses, Themis. Daughter of Uranus and Gaia, she represented ancestral wisdom, a knowledge of the natural order that preceded Zeus himself. The fundamental resolution, however, did not come from her, but from the king of the gods. Zeus, in an act of profound strategic vision, chose Themis as his second wife and, more importantly, as his chief advisor. In doing so, he not only neutralized a powerful figure of the old regime, but integrated her essence into the heart of the new. From their union would be born the Hours, Eunomia, the good order, Dike, moral justice, and Irene, peace, and according to some traditions, the Moirai, the weavers of fate. They would not be mere goddesses, but the very manifestation of their mother's principles. The development of Themis's influence was gradual but inexorable. In Olympus, it was she who convened the assemblies of the gods, ensuring that even the immortals adhered to a protocol, to an established order. Her silent presence was a constant reminder that there were rules that even the most powerful could not ignore without consequences. When sacred oaths were pronounced, it was before the spirit of Themis that they were made, and their violation brought inevitable retribution. She did not wield a weapon. Her power resided in the immutable truth of natural law. This principle extended to the mortal world in a mysterious and profound way. Before Apollo claimed Delphi, it was Themis who presided over the oracle. Her prophecies were not mere predictions of the future, but revelations of the right path, of the course of action that was in harmony with the cosmic order. The kings and legislators of the emerging city-states of Greece, men like Solon of Athens or Lycurgus of Sparta, did not see their legal codes as mere human inventions. They believed they were an attempt to embody divine Themis on earth, the celestial order that Themis embodied. The balance that would become their symbol did not weigh gold or power, but the righteousness of an act against the structure of the universe. The immediate consequences of this new paradigm were monumental. Olympus transformed from a court of unpredictable despots to a pantheon with a structure. However imperfect it may have been, justice, although often harsh and enigmatic, began to be seen as a pillar of the universe, not as the whim of an angry god. For humanity, this meant the birth of the concept of civic and moral law as a reflection of a higher order. The idea that certain actions were intrinsically wrong not just because they angered a god, but because they violated a fundamental balance, began to take root in the collective consciousness. A crucial distinction was established. Themis was the divine, universal, and immutable law, while her daughter, represented justice in the human world, the judgment applied to specific cases. This duality created a framework for civilization, a shared language of right and wrong that allowed for the flourishing of philosophy, politics, and ethics. But at the heart of this imposing structure of order and law lies a profound enigma, embodied in the most famous image of Themis, that of a figure with blindfolded eyes. Common interpretation celebrates this blindness as a symbol of impartiality, the promise that justice is not influenced by appearance, wealth, or power. But what if the blindfold concealed a more unsettling truth? Could it be that cosmic justice, in its pursuit of overall balance, is fundamentally blind to the individual? What comfort does universal law offer to the innocent victim crushed by the wheels of fate, a fate that Themis herself helps to uphold? The mystery of Themis is the irresolvable tension between the perfect order of the cosmos and the chaotic suffering of human experience. Her justice is a fundamental pillar of civilization, but her silence in the face of individual tragedy resonates as an unanswered question through the ages. However, what happens when divine order and social balance are challenged not by rebellion or chaos, but by an equally disruptive force emanating from within the individual? What form of justice awaits one whose devotion becomes so exclusive to oneself that it denies the outside world, breaking the fundamental pact of community? The universe of Themis is based on relationship and balance, but a new story was about to explore the abyss of self-reflection. A self-love so absolute that it would become its own tragic law. But while the scales of Themis weighed the fates of kingdoms and gods, divine justice sometimes operated on a much more intimate and personal scale, weaving punishments that did not topple cities but consumed a single soul. In a Greek world that revered physical beauty as a reflection of inner goodness, the concept of *kallikagathia* gave rise to a story that would serve as an eternal warning against excessive pride, *hubris*. This was not a time of great wars or divine rebellions, but a period of philosophical reflection, where questions about the nature of being, love, and identity began to resonate in the academies and porticos. In this cultural breeding ground, where aesthetic perfection was both an ideal and a danger, a figure was born whose name would become synonymous with self-obsession. His story is the enigma of beauty turned into prison. The actors in this intimate tragedy were marked by fate from the beginning. The protagonist, Narcissus, was the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liriope. His beauty was so extraordinary that from his birth it inspired admiration and desire in all who beheld him. Concerned for the future of such a singular child, Liriope made the crucial decision to consult the most famous blind seer of Thebes, Tiresias. The prophecy she received was a mystery wrapped in a warning. The boy would live a long life as long as he did not come to know himself. Beside him, in the shadows of the forest, waited Echo, a mountain nymph punished by the goddess Hera. Her crime was distracting the queen of the gods with her incessant chatter while Zeus indulged in his infidelities. As punishment, Hera stripped her of the ability to speak for herself, condemning her to repeat only the last words she heard. Echo's decision to fall in love with Narcissus, a love she could not express, would seal her tragic fate. and over them all, vigilant, loomed the shadow of Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, waiting for the affront that would inevitably trigger her just vengeance. As the years passed, Narcissus became a young man of legendary beauty, but his heart was as cold as his appearance was beautiful. He disdainfully rejected all his suitors, men and women alike, showing not the slightest empathy for the pain he caused. His arrogance was an impenetrable wall. One day, while hunting in the forest, the nymph Echo saw him and was instantly captivated. She secretly followed him, longing to speak to him, but her curse prevented her. When Narcissus, feeling watched, shouted, "Is anyone here?" Echo could only respond, "Here, here." The confused conversation continued until she, in a fit of passion, stepped out from the trees to embrace him. He cruelly pushed her away, shouting, "I would rather die than be yours." Heartbroken, Echo could only repeat his last words, "Be yours," as she fled to hide in the caves. There, consumed by grief and humiliation, her body faded until only her voice remained, a perpetual echo in lonely places. But Narcissus's cruelty would not go unanswered. One of his rejected suitors raised a prayer to the heavens, asking Nemesis that Narcissus feel one day the pain of unrequited love. The goddess listened. The consequences of this prayer did not take long to manifest. Nemesis guided the young man, heated and thirsty after the hunt, to a hidden pond deep in the forest. Its waters were so clear and still that they acted as a perfect mirror. As he bent down to drink, Narcissus saw for the first time his own reflection. He was paralyzed. He had never seen a being of such beauty. Ignorant that it was his own image, he fell madly in love with the figure that gazed back at him from the water. Tiresias's prophecy was being fulfilled in the most literal and cruel way. He tried to embrace and kiss the beautiful youth in the pond, but he could only find the cold water. The object of his desire was so close and yet unattainable. He forgot hunger, thirst, and sleep, prostrated on the shore, consumed by an impossible longing. His body weakened until, with one last sigh directed at his reflection, he exclaimed, "Farewell, beloved," in vain. Echo's voice, hidden nearby, sadly repeated his last words. When the water and forest nymphs arrived to prepare his funeral pyre, they found no body. Instead, on the shore of the pond, a flower with a golden center and white petals had bloomed, which since then bends its corolla toward the water, as if still searching for that unreachable reflection. Here lies the central enigma of the myth, a paradox that transcends the simple moral about vanity. The prophecy said that Narcissus would live if he did not know himself. But what really happened at that pond? Was his encounter with the reflection the definitive act of self-knowledge, or his most tragic failure in not recognizing himself in it? The story becomes a dark inversion of the famous Delphic aphorism, "Know thyself." It raises a troubling question about the nature of identity and self-perception. Is it possible that self-knowledge, taken to the extreme of obsession, becomes not wisdom but a form of annihilation? The mystery of Narcissus is not only that of a young man who drowned in his own beauty, but of the thin line that separates self-love from self-destruction, an echo that resonates in human psychology to this day. The flower withered with winter, but the story, the concept of narcissism, took deep root in human consciousness, an immortal echo that, like so many other tales of gods and mortals, compels us to examine the true legacy of myths and their incessant influence on our world. ****** Error in generating the content of Chapter 25 ********. The great mystery of Japan is no longer found in the tombs of ancient emperors, in the secret codes of ninjas, or in the lost scrolls of monasteries. The true mystery is the soul of its future, having been a closed civilization, an expansive empire, a devastated nation, and a pacifist economic giant. What identity will it choose to forge in the 21st century? The answer to this question will not only define the fate of 125 million people, but will also have profound repercussions for the global balance of power. Japan stands at the crossroads not only of its own history but of the history of the world, from the myths of divine creation to the complex algorithms that now govern its cities. We have witnessed this nation's astonishing capacity for destruction and reconstruction, for isolation and adaptation. The history of Japan is the chronicle of an island that, time and again, has absorbed the stormy waves of the outside world, only to return them transformed with an unmistakably unique echo. Its future remains a canvas yet to be painted, but its past whispers an immutable truth to us. Like the tides that kiss its ancient shores, it will always find a way to endure, to transform, and to be reborn.